Hey, let's discuss this spending bill. We have tax attorney Rebecca Walser and former Trump senior economic advisor Stephen Moore. Thank you both for coming on here. Rebecca, I'm going to start with you. To Kilmeny's point, to GOP members in the House, their point, the spending continues here. Pandemic spending levels here. What's your initial take?
I mean, I don't understand how they justify it, Bob. Like, if we are going to perpetually have a $7.3 trillion budget, as Biden has proposed for 2025, and we're going to continuously come to these continuing resolutions to just keep the funding going, and they're coming out with omnibus of $1.2 trillion that has to be read in less than a day. That means can't be debated, or else we're potentially shutting down again if this doesn't get passed this weekend. This is not a way to govern on a financial, fiscal, responsible basis, and it leads to these kinds of spending waste getting through because nobody has the time to actually fight them.
That's a great point. Stephen, want to get your reaction to this. Obviously, there has to be some budget passed. I mean, you have to spend money to get some things done. But again, you're the former Trump senior economic advisor. What looks wrong about this bill to you, or does it?
Well, look, I'm not going to apologize to Republicans because they'd like to spend money too, but let's not forget that the debt over the next 10 years is $8 trillion higher than it would have been if we stuck with the Trump baseline. So we do have a debt crisis and a overspending crisis in this country. Republicans have about, a 2 or 3 seat majority in the House out of 435. They don't control the Senate and they don't control the White House. So we shouldn't expect much else out of this. I think Speaker Johnson probably did the best job that he could. But, you know, if you look at what's happened with our budget and this new budget that Biden has introduced, I just ran these numbers this morning, that would be, are you ready for this? $57,500 of federal spending for every household in America.
Wow.
$57,500. The average household income in the country is $73,000. So where is all that money going?
Yeah, it seems a little out of whack there, out of balance to continue this burden here. Back to Speaker Johnson. Let's go through these again. He says the GOP, Rebecca, came out as big winners in this, including 22,000 border agents, troops pay increase, cuts to Pentagon DEI programs, no funding to UNRWA, and it prevents banning gas stoves. But such a costly package here. Do you think, to Rand Paul's point here, that they should have fought harder because they got the numbers right now in the House to do so?
Well, yes, Bob, they do have, to Steve's point, they have a very, very thin majority. And again, I think it's a timing issue. It's these constant pushes up to continuing resolutions that if it doesn't get passed, the government shuts down. There's such an incredible amount of pressure that you kind of have to just take whatever's in that bill. How do they have real meaningful opportunity to say no? They have to keep the government going.
It just seems like they're powerless, though.
And I got to say something. As someone who doesn't want money spent, if the government shuts down, that gives Janet Yellen, as Treasury Secretary, all kinds of emergency measures for which she can go into more debt spending. So I hate this, but I also say it's better than the alternative, which is, unfortunately, a lot of the decisions you have to make in politics.
Yeah, great point there. I want to move on to this. Electric cars, big topic in the news today. And to do that, we also want to bring in former Trump-Pence EPA transition team member Steve Malloy into our conversation here. Steve, great to have you with us here. Yesterday, the Biden administration rolled out new tailpipe rules to cut down on emissions. Now, the rules seen as a big win for the electric car industry. Half of new vehicles sold by 2032 will be electric. Now, I'm looking at this thinking this looks to me and sounds to me like a classic example of government overreach, trying to tell us what we can and can't buy. That's why I was happy to see that no gas stove banning in the
no
spending
gas
bill.
For you.
That's why
right.
I wanted it on there. But, you know, it just seems, Steve, though, that electricity is something that is described to be at kind of an all-time low with expected power outages. And then you have the government saying, no, let's just make every car electric. It doesn't seem to add up to me.
Yeah, so Katrina and Bob, thanks for having me. Look, Katrina, you put your finger on it. This rule is an overreach by EPA. It will not survive its first brush with the court. While arguably Congress has authorized EPA to regulate tailpipe emissions, Congress did not authorize EPA to regulate them to the extent where it's an effective or de facto ban on gasoline-powered cars. And under the Supreme Court decision in West Virginia versus EPA from 2022, this will not stand. It's only a matter of which court will, draw the line in the sand. The rule makes no sense from an environmental perspective to start with. It would make cars prohibitively expensive while doing nothing for climate or the environment. Even if you believe in the climate hoax, it will only reduce global emissions by less than 0.5% over the next 30 years. So that's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole rule is a disaster. Can't wait for it to get to court where it will be killed right away.
Well, part of it's the infrastructure here. Stephen, I want to ask you about this. A big component of all this is the electricity demand here that's going to be happening. To Katrina's point, a recent report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation estimated that more than 300 million people in the U.S. and Canada could face power shortages in 2024. It also found that electricity demand is rising faster now than at any time in the past 5 years. So when you have these rules, regulations coming in, more EVs on the road, how are we going to sustain this? Are we set up to sustain this?
No,
it's not meant to sustain it.
Stephen Moore, go ahead.
Two Steves here.
Yeah,
So just look at what's happened in California, where they've had rolling brownouts and blackouts over the last several years. They're the state that's sort of leading the way and going green, and they have to turn the lights out. The air conditioning goes off. Now, the thing that I think is so outrageous about this is Americans have been speaking loud and clear that they don't want electric cars. Only 6% of the car sales these days, despite all the rebates and all the subsidies, are electric cars. Remember when Obama famously said, if you like your health care, you can keep your health care. He was lying, but Biden isn't saying that. He's saying, I don't care. He's not saying if you like your car, you can keep it. He's saying, if you like your car, we're going to take it away from you. People are going to start hoarding gas cars because they think that the government's going to take their cars away from them and you can't buy a gas car. It's really an outrageous of our freedoms.
That's a great point. Rebecca, I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, okay, we're talking about that government overreach saying, okay, here are the only types of cars you can buy.
Right.
Then again, they were trying to say, okay, here are the only types of stoves you can use. We're not allowed, they banned incandescent light bulbs last August. It just seems absolutely extreme, all in the name of energy.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is they're contradictory policies. They're asking us to buy something that you have to plug in that runs on electricity, and they're not even reliable at this point.
And we also know that our electric grid could not handle the entire fleet of cars going to EV cars. The Supreme Court heard two cases, Loper and Relentless, on January 17th, and specifically it was about overstepping of executive branches and administrations creating rules that never were passed by Congress. And it's called Chevron deference. Basically, the Chevron doctrine says if the rule or the law is ambiguous, we will defer to the executive agency and what the rule says. And that does not give citizens, anybody, recourse, because if the judicial branch is referring to the executive branch and the rules that they're making and deferring to them, then where's the redress? The judicial branch is to interpret the law. So we believe legally that the Chevron doctrine is going to be overturned. It's a 1984 doctrine, and that will completely change the administrative state as we know it. So look out for that decision this June.
I think another big thing on people's minds, where are the EVs going to be made? Are they going to be made in the United States or somewhere else?
Yeah. Where are those batteries going to be thrown away?
That's right. All right. Stephen Moore, Steve Malloy, both Steves, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Rebecca Walser, we're going to see you again.
Scott's Project 21 member Dawn Marie Borsico and Rebecca Walser back with us in studio. Great to have you both with us. Rebecca, I'm going to start to you. Absolutely obnoxious for this random guy, especially a former executive, to say that someone who just turned 18 is now fair game. What do you think?
You know, Katrina, the dichotomy of how the left and the progressives treat Republican children versus how they treat, the Democratic children. Hunter Biden is the best example. When we have a person who has on record, on video, that's public, in the public domain, them using illegal substances, them participating in illegal transactions with women, when we have these kinds of things and you see almost an obfuscation of that, a tapping down of that, like let's censor that and not have that out in the public domain, but when Barron Trump turns 18, let's go ahead and tell the world that now he's fair game. It's disgusting, and I'm tired of the double standard. People need to call it out. It's like the Republican side, I hate to say it, but they don't defend their own, and they don't go after that, saying this is egregious and beyond the pale, and this is not civilized society.
Yeah, I mean, leave him alone, I say.
Jeez.
Dawn Marie, some critics of Sinkton's really bizarre post saying the comment could also be construed as sexual in nature, kind of implying that he is now of legal consent age. Do you see it that way?
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. They want to find something else to come after Donald Trump about, because the older children have already grown. They've gone through school. You know, looking at how Barron Trump has been educated, the left, the other side is going to try to attack that. They're going to try to use it against them because, oh, he can't relate. It is absolutely unfair. They're going to try to vilify this family for their ability to provide their son with a quality, exceptional education. They want to find other reasons and tactics to come against this family for any possible reason.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I want to move on to this, but also I learned that our Barron Trump is 6 feet 7 inches tall. He's very, very tall. Anyway, I was impressed by that. All right. Also want to move on to this. For the first time ever, the United States has fallen out of the world's top 20 happiest countries list. Now, that's just sad. Finland tops the list, while the United States comes in all the way at 23. Researchers say what's more surprising here is that younger Americans are unhappier than older Americans. I don't know. What do you think, Rebecca? Is it an age thing? Do you think it's what's going on in our society? Like nobody's nice. Just like that Barron Trump thing.
I'm so glad you found out he's 6'7", though. I wanted to know because he's so tall. I'm so glad you found out. You know, I think that, you know, Katrina, it's just, I'm sorry, I completely went off on Barron 6'7".
No, that's totally fine. Yeah.
So what we were talking about.
Yeah, just not being people not being
oh
happy.
Oh my gosh, this
States.
is the first time that we've ever dropped out of the top 20. Yeah. I think Gen Z is looking at TikTok for their news. TikTok is definitely not a U.S. social media app. It's obviously different. It's run by the CCP. And so there is some concerns through ownership. There's some concerns there about TikTok. That's why we're talking about TikTok as, you know, divesting from China. But yes, Katrina, when you're looking at TikTok for your news, that's not going to be a great source.
Yeah, with 10 seconds left. Dawn Marie, final word.
We are a nation that has lost identity. The older generation knew who they were. They had standards. And now we have a bunch of mishmash, wish-wash, and these young people don't know where to turn. They don't know what to believe in. People need standards, morality, so that begins to dissipate all the other issues of loneliness and unhappiness. All right, well, hopefully we get back their identity.
Well, hopefully we can turn that around. Rebecca Walser, Dawn Marie Borsico, great conversation. Thanks for joining me on The Other View. All right.